I'm NBC Connecticut meteorologist Rochelle J with a Tuesday morning, September 24th update on the Atlantic tropics. We're keeping an eye on potential tropical cyclone 9 for the rest of this video. We're just going to call it 9. So this is currently located in the Western Caribbean, keeping an eye on it for areas of Cuba, the Cayman Islands, even maybe far western areas of Jamaica, as well as some locations in Central America for impacts from this storm within the next day or so before it moves out into the Gulf of Mexico. So your science Q&A of the day, you might be wondering, Rochelle, what is a potential tropical cyclone? It just lacks some qualifications to be called a tropical system. It still poses a threat of at least tropical storm conditions within the next 2 days, 48 hours. And once it's given that PTC designation, that allows the National Hurricane Center to issue alerts like watches and warnings, discussions, as well as that cone showing where the storm could go. And these are named potential tropical cyclone 1, 2, etc. So now we are on the 9th of those for this season. So here's where we stand as far as the 2024 season in the Atlantic goes. We have reached the G name, so the next name on the list that we're expecting 9 to gain, once it gains all of those tropical characteristics, will be Helene. And then the next name after that is Isaac, Joyce, Kirk, and Leslie. So we'll see how far into the list we'll get for this season. So here's another look at that tropical satellite through 9 a.m. on Tuesday. The storm not very well organized. It doesn't have that shape that you'd expect it to have when we're looking at a tropical system, and that's why it's been designated as a PTC versus a full-blown tropical system, whether it's a tropical depression, tropical storm, et cetera, et cetera. So we're monitoring that. This storm is moving over very warm waters. I put the sea surface temperatures under this. Anywhere you're seeing in those deep burgundies or very, very dark browns, that's where we're talking about high 80s, upper 80s Fahrenheit temperatures for those sea surface temperatures. So 9 is able to feed off of all of that warm water, and it's not just at the surface, but just taking the satellite image off so you can see there is a lot of warm water in the Western Caribbean, as well as in the Gulf of Mexico, where we're anticipating that storm to go. And as mentioned, it's not just at the surface. So what I'm looking at here is something called heat potential. So that shows us the heat content below the surface. How far down does that warm water go? And that's also pretty impressive in the Western Caribbean. And then pretty much right along that path, we're expecting the storm to move over the next couple of days. So warm water at the surface, and then as you head deep down, we also have very warm water. Now, we do also have something that's called wind shear. So that's where we have a difference in wind direction or speed as you go higher up in the atmosphere. There's a little bit of that in the way of 9 right now, but we do have those pretty warm waters. So we've got kind of those two things that are almost fighting against each other. In addition to, there's some dry air on the north side of the storm. So here's the southern portion of Florida. This is Cuba. We've got the Cayman Islands, Jamaica's right here. And then we also have the Yucatan Peninsula toward the left part of your screen. This is 9 right here. Again, not very well organized. So anywhere in the teal, that's more moist air. And then we have the drier air in that light brown or that tan color just to the north of it. So here's a look at the current advisories for 9. Now, some of them are missing. We do have some other advisories here on the western side of Cuba. You can also notice along the Yucatan, we've got that hurricane watch under the tropical storm warning. That warning takes precedence over the watch, but it does still exist there. And also for the Cayman Islands, we have a tropical storm warning this morning as well. Let's take you up to Florida, to western Florida, the Gulf side of Florida. Tropical storm watches, as well as a hurricane watch currently in place for that western side of Florida. So we'll keep an eye on those, anticipating those watches to be upgraded to warnings as we move through the next couple of days. Here's the current cone for 9. We're anticipating it to eventually become a tropical storm, gaining that name Helene. And as it moves over those warm waters we looked at, become a Category 1, and then possibly within 24 hours, a Category 3 hurricane. I want to remind you, though, that the cone only shows you potential locations for the center of these storms, and these storms can span hundreds of miles. So keep that in mind as you're keeping an eye on the cone and how it may change just a bit. pretty consistent with that forecasted landfall of the center of the storm somewhere in the Big Bend of Florida. So we'll start to see that narrow down as we get closer to that likely Thursday night, if not early Friday landfall for this storm. So let's take a look at that track in a different way. So I'm going to show you two longer range computer models that we look at. The GFS will be in teal and then the European will be in the orange color, and just comparing how these two computer outputs are showing the progression, the strength, and the movement of this system. So they're both going to show some strengthening as we go toward Wednesday midday. So you see the more of these little lines that we have, those circles, that's indicating a stronger storm. And watch how this thing strengthens. It absolutely blossoms over those warm waters that we mentioned. So here we are on Thursday morning. The GFS, that American model, looks like it has a slightly stronger storm than the European, but still strengthening as it moves toward that landfall. And it does look like the American model has a slightly earlier landfall, but still pretty close in time frame. And of course, it moves overland during the day on Friday and is anticipated to weaken. Now let's look at that as far as radar goes, because I mentioned these storms, they're not just the center, right? So check this out. Still not quite having its act together, but as we look toward Wednesday morning, we're starting to see a little bit more of that eye trying to develop on future radar here. And as we go into the Gulf of Mexico with 9, here we are on Thursday morning, potentially a hurricane by this point. We'll keep an eye on the exact timing of that, but you see that eye well developed, and watch how this storm continues to move off to the north, eventually again making that landfall, if not late on Thursday, early on Friday morning. So this will likely change as we look toward the next couple of days as far as where it moves that landfall. But again, somewhere along that Big Bend area of Florida is where we're watching for that. And as it moves inland, it continues to cause issues as far as potential flooding, potential for severe weather, and again, continuing to monitor it even after it moves inland. So here's a look at something called the excessive rainfall outlook. So this is for Wednesday. This is that risk for exceeding the threshold for flash flooding. We've got a level 2 risk there in parts of the Florida Panhandle, but most of western Florida under a level 1 out of 4 risk. Now that goes to a level 3 out of 4 risk during the day on Thursday for not just Florida, but that also includes some areas of Georgia, as well as western South Carolina and far southwestern areas of North Carolina as well. During the day on Friday, that shifts north as the storm shifts north, more so moving toward the mid-Atlantic, but still into the Carolinas and some areas of Virginia with that level 2 out of 4 risk. Also some northern zones of Georgia too. So how much rain could we be talking? Now, there's a bit of a difference with the models. I don't want you to look at your area or area you know someone in and say, oh my goodness, this is the total we're going to get. Again, this is going to change slightly over the next couple of days, but we do have big time rain potential as far as the European model goes through some areas of the southeastern U.S. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now, when we switch it over to the GFS, the numbers in some areas are quite a bit different, but still a decent amount of rain regardless of which one you're looking at. So we do have that possibility for very heavy rainfall with this storm. And we also have that possibility for storm surge pretty much all along the Gulf Coast of Florida, outside of maybe some far western areas of the Panhandle. Right now, we've got that's a storm surge watch currently in place. Now, I want to look at wave heights as well. So there's a lot of things that we look at when we're talking about potential impacts from these tropical systems. It's not just the wind, it's the storm surge, heavy rain, potential for severe weather, which we'll look at in a second, and also possible wave heights. We're watching those wave heights increase during the day on Tuesday, early on Wednesday morning. Possibility for wave heights 15 to 20 feet. We keep that around until about Tuesday morning. As that storm strengthens, as it blossoms over the warm waters, possibly we could see those wave heights 20 plus feet, and that'll continue potentially as it moves toward and eventually makes landfall in Florida late on Thursday or early Friday morning. So here's a look at that possible storm surge for 9 as it moves northward along Florida. So anywhere in the red is up to 10 feet, and anywhere you're seeing in that purple we've got the potential for 12 feet or more of storm surge from this system. So a lot of things we're watching. We've got a level 1 out of 5 risk for severe weather coming up on Thursday. I would think that this is mainly for the threat of tornadoes. We typically can get tornadic activity as tropical systems, whether it's a tropical storm or hurricane, major hurricane. We do get some spin up tornadoes from these storms as they move overland. So something else that we'll continue to watch. So elsewhere in the tropics, besides 9, we also have another area that we're keeping an eye on the far eastern Atlantic right now with a high chance for tropical development. So just these 2 things that we're watching as we look through at least the next couple of days. But we're continuing to monitor the tropics through the end of November. That is when the hurricane season will end. So I want to thank you so much for watching this. I hope that this was informative. If it was, please share it with someone. Just let them know kind of what is going on. Of course, check back for updates at your local forecast office as to what's going on if you are in the path of 9. Again, eventually expected to become Helene.